I am so excited about today's guest. Someone I look up to, Shannon Cohn, the director and producer of Below the Belt and Endo. Thank you so much for being here and chatting with us today on the cycle.
Of course, it's an honor.
Very, very grateful to chat with you. So, just to start off, why did you make these films?
Oh, wow. That's a big one, though, even though it sounds simple. I was a filmmaker in New York, and we were like a boutique independent documentary production house. And we were kind of on the forefront of making films that create social change and really building social action campaigns around the films that we were producing. And one day, actually, after my second daughter was born, after, by the way, having infertility and having numerous miscarriages because I'd had endometriosis symptoms since I was 16. But I was reading an article when I was working at this production house in New York about the 7 times increased risk, genetic risk of endometriosis between mothers and daughters and among sisters. And something just kind of crystallized for me in that moment that nothing had really changed, in the 20 years since I first had symptoms. People were still going 8 to 10 years before they even heard the word endometriosis. And then when they finally got a diagnosis, the way forward for treatments was still also murky. So I just realized, like, well, I'm making films that are all about creating progress and social change. If there were ever a condition that needed some attention, a spotlight like this, it's endometriosis.
Yeah.
So when I started delving into it, I started researching the disease even more fully than I had before as a patient, but I started looking at it through the lens of a storyteller and a filmmaker, which is a different lens, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
And started interviewing experts and trying to just understand the landscape a bit better from their perspective. And while I thought it was going to be one film at first, it very quickly occurred to me that it probably should be two films because they have two very different purposes. Endo What, which is the film we released a few years ago, is an educational film. It's really meant for people who have endometriosis or healthcare providers who treat endometriosis, or who, hello, where's my coffee? Or who are like situated to be on the front line, like school nurses, like pediatricians, and primary care physicians, so that they understand, and have an accurate base of knowledge about the disease. Because, as you know, the landscape is rife with misinformation in the media and healthcare, and education, all of those things.
Yeah.
There's so much conflicting information from credible sources. It's
Yes.
kind of maddening.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, if I can give my number one goal with Endo What is to give a patient like I was at 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, looking
Yeah.
for answers, going through all these tests, seeing a ton of specialists, give them all of the things I wish I had known then. It doesn't have all the answers, but it gets them started on their journey. That was the goal, because then they have to seek individualized care. And then that was a very specific goal, but Below the Belt, it has a different goal. It's really meant to put endometriosis on the mainstream map
Mm-hmm.
so that, your Uncle Joe in Iowa, who really has never heard of it and has never thought to care about it, can watch the film and care about these people that, he's learning about and watching their lives unfold. And by extension, maybe be aware of the issues, care a little bit about the issues. Uncle Joe doesn't have to go out and march to Congress or anything. That's not necessarily the goal with that, but it'd be great if he just understands there is a disease called endometriosis and it causes a real human impact on the people who have it and the people around them. So that's the goal with Below the Belt. They're both meant to be tools, tools for people to use to catalyze change, to work together, to collaborate. To spark conversations among stakeholders, among government leaders, healthcare providers, patient advocates, all of those people to come together to say, okay, this is important and we need to do something about it. So what can we do?
Yeah. And I mean, thank you from myself and the community. Even just, I did a screening of Endo What, and I am going to do one of Below the Belt. But when I did that screening, just so many people who were even my friends and family who were in the audience that had a different understanding, right? So yes, to make change, but even in those like personal relationships, and a lot of people, then I would say, go get this film, watch it with your family, because hearing it firsthand from a patient, like your parents, your friends, they just may think you're complaining. They don't understand the severity of this disease. And I feel like both of those films paint that picture, right? So people really understand, no, this isn't something where I have a little bit of cramps or digestion issues. This is pretty serious. And
Right.
it helped. I mean, I had a very good friend who would give me a hard time when I would cancel plans, who walked out of that screening crying and apologizing to me, which, not that that's what I wanted, but just to see that she understood how serious
Yes.
it is.
I like exactly to your point. When I say change, it can be from the macro or down to
Yeah,
the micro level.
right.
Some of the most heartening responses I received recently to Below the Belt at some of the screenings we've done is partners who have come up to me and said, I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that I think this film may have helped save our relationship,
Yeah.
because until then I didn't really understand. Something just hit me in the film that I understood better, and that I also felt seen.
Yeah.
Because in Below the Belt, we really do focus on the caregivers quite a bit and show what a impact it makes on the people around,
Yes. Yeah.
someone who's struggling with endometriosis, because it does affect everyone.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So I agree with that. I just appreciate the film so much. So a little bit about just you and your personal endo journey. You've mentioned it a little bit, but were there things like, when were you diagnosed? How did you find out you had endo?
not easily.
Yes.
No, I mean, like so many people, I had symptoms as a teenager. My first symptoms were GI symptoms, which is a high percentage of people actually first present with GI symptoms.
Mhm.
Yes, I had painful periods, but GI symptoms were the most common symptom I had. I mean, I had those, I don't know, 15 days out of every month,
Yeah.
whereas I had painful periods for 2 days, you know?
Right. Right.
So chasing a lot of specialists. I've had, at someone
Yeah.
my age, I've had like 5 colonoscopies. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous. Every time
Yeah.
I go to a different city and see a GI specialist, they insist on another colonoscopy. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm good, guys,
Yeah. You're
like at
good.
least for now.
Yeah.
So but really, just like so many people, going to all the specialists, having
Yeah.
multiple tests, from brain MRIs to CAT scans to colonoscopies and invasive procedures, having a gallbladder removed, I've had an ovary removed,
Yeah.
things like that, where you start losing body parts literally
Yeah.
on the road to finding answers.
Yeah.
It feels so unjust.
Yeah.
Um, and then finally at 29, so 13 years later, I first heard the word endometriosis. And then by the doctor, she kind of said it flippantly, like, oh, because I had surgery for another reason. She was an OBGYN. And she was like, oh, what was in there? I think I saw some endometriosis. And she was like, I didn't touch it.
Oh
I
my
was just like,
gosh.
what did she just tell
What is
me?
that word? Like, were
And
you, yeah.
no, I was like, what? And I literally Googled it, I
Yeah.
Googled it and misspelled it, of course, and was trying to figure out what it is. And it focused on the answer, focused on fertility and things like that. And it
Yeah.
totally freaked me out, of course. And then
Yeah.
I followed up with her and was like, I need you to tell me more about this word, because it sounds kind of scary. But then she
Right.
kind of blew it off too. She goes, if you're not, by that point, I was having symptoms, but for some reason they had improved. I don't know why, but still a mystery. Endo's a mystery. Um, and she was like, if you're not having symptoms, don't worry about it. We'll just see if you can't get pregnant, kind of a thing, which is what's told,
Yeah.
often to women.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners may have had the same. A lot of people have progressive symptoms. They get,
Yes.
worse over time, and they don't really deviate. Mine were not like that. It's very strange. Like as a teenager, they were awful.
Mhm.
And then they got better for a little while, and then they would get bad again. I'm talking about over years. And then I
Sure.
have 2 or 3 years where I felt better.
Yeah.
And then in my 20s, they were better. And then all of a sudden, something triggered it and they were awful, absolutely awful. It's like I said, it's a mystery,
It's
how this
unpredictable.
disease, yeah, how the disease affects people in different ways. And and that also is really interesting how it affects people emotionally and mentally, because you don't know when the symptoms are going to come back, and you don't really understand what may be triggering them.
Mhm.
It may be something completely out of your control. Like it wasn't diet, it could be hormonal changes, we just don't know.
We don't.
Environment, what do we,
Yeah.
so that kind of unknown of the day to day is really unsettling.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I feel that. I know a lot of the listeners feel that. And that's one of the biggest things. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that. I just wanted to get a little bit of a behind the scenes personal. I mean, clearly you have motivation for the reason behind you, why you've made these titles. But in your research for either Below the Belt or following people around, what was like one of the most like eye-opening things that you've learned from this process? Something that was just like, wow.
I
It's
mean,
a
to be
hard
quite
question.
frank, no, I mean, if you want to be brutally honest here, I
Yeah.
was completely wowed by the amount of politics and ego and endometriosis, mainly among healthcare providers.
Okay. Yeah. Yes.
And how this one doesn't like this one, or that one doesn't think that one's very good. And when I've been doing interviews with experts, very often when the camera stopped rolling, someone was like, "Oh, did you interview so and so?" Oh, kind of a thing.
Like,
And
what?
I was kind of floored by that. And I was actually even told by a well-known expert on camera. And he said, one reason we haven't had progress in endometriosis is all of the politics and the egos among certain people in power
It's heartbreaking. It
within
was
the
just
field.
just hearing that is heartbreaking because there's so many people just suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But people just kind of see their own situation, and
Yeah.
it's a bit difficult. So I was floored by that. I guess I went into it very naively, just thinking, oh, of course everybody's, got the same goal, and we do ultimately, people
We
do.
do. Yeah.
But at the same time, a lot of other human things, I guess, get in the way. So
Egos.
yeah, so I was surprised by that.
Yeah. 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 That's well, talk to me about all of these incredible people that you worked with on the film. I mean, you've got big names like Hillary Clinton, Rosario Dawson. I mean, what was it like to work with all of them and like have people passionate behind this film for you? What was that like?
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, people recognize that this is a condition that needs more attention,
Yeah.
that it's been supremely overlooked, minimized, dismissed for, decades,
Mhm.
to the suffering of people who have it.
Yeah.
And I think so many times, if people just are made aware of what's going on, they're outraged and they want to do something about it.
Yeah.
I co-taught this class last week at Harvard Medical School in bioethics, and I didn't really know what to expect talking to medical students. I was kind of going into it thinking like, are they going to be skeptical? Are they going to,
Right.
like what?
Right.
And when they watched Below the Belt, and then we discussed a lot of the issues, like larger systemic healthcare issues that it raises, like gender bias in medicine, racial
Yeah.
bias in medicine, what is informed consent, financial barriers to care, all of these big issue things that the
Yeah.
film looks at. And when they learned about endometriosis and its scale and the devastation that it's caused, all of them were outraged. None of them knew that this was happening.
Yeah.
And they were all absolutely outraged
Mhm.
and passionate about, doing something about it. I mean, are all of them going to go be OBGYNs or gynecologic surgeons? No. But I mean, whatever specialty they go in, our hope is that because they've seen the film and their hearts and their minds have been touched in a different way,
Mhm.
they will remember endometriosis. They will remember the human toll. that it causes. And maybe when someone comes into their office, no matter what specialty they're in with these symptoms, they listen with a more empathetic ear and are able to refer them to a specialist or put them on the right path. That's the goal. But I was heartened to know that, like your point, like how did we get all these big names? It's just telling them this is the situation that people don't know about.
Yeah.
And then, like these medical students, they're outraged and want to do something about it.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that's incredible effort, and that you were able to do that and teach that. And it's something I talk about on the show a lot too, is it really is a systemic, I mean, lack of awareness. If we can even just get the awareness, which I think your film is going to do, because it's going to appear. So we have an international crowd, but we'll talk about that. But PBS, it's going to be shown. Not 90 million viewers. Is that what it is?
I mean, I'm hearing all of these big numbers, but yes, that's what I'm hearing. Over a year, 100 viewed, hundreds of times, over hundreds of stations. So
I have
that's exciting.
chills. That's a game.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a game changer, just even for people to know what the word means. I would say, the 20 years I've been kind of advocating for this disease, a lot more people know the word, but they still don't know the implications of what it means to have that disease, right? They just, and I think having this, what did that mean to you when you were like, oh my gosh, I am actually going to get this on PBS and all of these people are going to see it? When you found that out, what was that moment like?
I mean, relief. Relief that, something that started with a lot of doubt among the people around me, that I would spend all of this time and effort, and the team that we put together.
Yeah.
We would have spent all of this time and effort for years making movies about this disease that nobody had ever heard of or could pronounce. That felt great, because it means that it's okay. We were right to pursue this. We were right in thinking that this condition needed to be understood and witnessed by millions, because it does, as
It
you and I
does.
know,
Yeah, it does.
but people who don't have it or live with it don't realize. So yes, I was relieved. I was definitely heartened to know that. And I do think it'll change things, for that large of an audience
Yeah.
to not only hear about endometriosis, but to your point, like understand and be impacted emotionally with
Yes.
the stories around endometriosis. And that's the power of storytelling.
Yeah. And I think the storytelling is actually incredible. And how long, I don't think a lot of people know this, how long you actually worked on this film.
We started filming Endo and Below the Belt 10 years ago, over 10 years ago now. And we started following the four main subjects in Below the Belt in 2014, I think. So 9 years ago.
Yeah.
Because we really wanted to follow them over several years. So we had a lot of footage to go through. Because we had limited budgets, I mean, we would go in person for, tests or surgeries or things like that. But because we honestly couldn't afford it to be there, obviously, in their lives every day, because they're all over North America, they filmed a lot with their phones. And at first I was like, oh, how's this going to work? And I think it actually just makes it more impactful. It makes it more intimate. And I just applaud the bravery of these four women who have done that and are letting millions of people into their most vulnerable, private, painful moments.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that everyone that was in the film was just so open. And I agree with you. So when people, for the listeners who are listening, when you do watch it, the phone scenes just make it's real. And it really is, right? You're seeing behind the scenes of things that people with endometriosis, which everyone who's listening to this already know, don't show to people on a typical basis. It's always behind closed doors. So it's exposing those things that we as patients hide all the time. And great example, I wasn't feeling great yesterday and I had a dinner and it was like planned for 4 months. And I was like, I'm just going to go and I'm just going to fake it, and I was like, no, you need to be honest. That's how people are going to learn. So It's a daily struggle for people with endometriosis. Okay, so we have a lot of international listeners, and I know that they are curious if they'll be able to access the film or watch the film. What is the plan for international?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So we're continuing special screenings in different countries. We have a ton lined up this year, and we'll be announcing those. Like in every continent, we'll be
Okay.
screening in the next few months. But we are going to have broadcast in various countries, and all of that information is coming soon.
Okay.
We're just in the stages, so we can't
Hmm.
announce it yet
Hmm.
until it's a done deal, you know. But I mean, of course, the film will be available in every country.
Good.
It's just to make sure that it's seen by the most amount of people, and not only that the film is valued and the work that we're trying to do is sustained, because all of the tickets, the merchandise sales, the screening fees that we charge go directly to the impact campaign, and there's no way that we can do the work that we are doing without that.
Yeah.
And it will be, I'm just trying to think of timing. I mean, it'll be later this year. We'll be releasing,
Okay.
information on how to view it in the broadcast. And then it will be on streaming eventually too. It just all takes time.
Yeah, takes time. And for anyone wanting information, follow your social media channels. So Endo what is the social media channels, but also the website, right? The website is belowthebelt.film. All the information's there. There's great sweatshirts. I actually bought two. They're super comfy, by the way. I love them. I wore
Thank
them.
you. I personally I
Love
was like,
them.
okay, I'm gonna make sure it's like the most comfortable sweatshirt around, right? But also still looks cool and it has that cool factor. My teenage daughter helped me,
They really are like
she's very discerning.
very fuzzy. I actually wore them on like a work Zoom all last Friday. It was on work Zooms,
Oh,
and people are
good.
like, "What does it say on your sweatshirt?" And I was like, "Endo what?" Like,
Yeah, that's so
oh,
great. Yeah.
oh boy, I'm
My
about to.
husband wears one a lot, actually. He wears
Yes.
one out, which I kind of love.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I love that. Well, anything else you want to add to listeners? A bunch of endometriosis patients on here that you're talking to about the film or anything, just information coming up. The floor is
Yeah, I mean,
yours.
I would say we would love for you to host a screening and bring the film to your community, your
Mhm.
town, and it can be big or small. Like we've had people hosting screenings in their backyard with a projector, and they just said, I want all of my family and friends to come and learn about endometriosis without me having to tell them, and
Yeah.
so they, popped a bunch of popcorn and got people in their backyard, and that was amazing.
Yeah.
And then some people, like you, are hosting, in a city at a cinema, and that's amazing too.
Mhm.
We really work with everyone to try to
Yeah.
find a balance so that it's accessible for them to do that. And we're kind of open to suggestions because we love the different ways that the film can be seen and shared.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Yeah. All that, go on the website if you want to learn more about that. And as Shannon mentioned, yes, I'm hosting, if you're in the Detroit area, which I know I have people everywhere, but March 8th, I'm hosting a screening. I have a panel of patients, and then actually the only excision doctor in our state in Michigan, Dr. K, is going to be there as well on the panel. So very, very excited to host it and just open those conversations. And very similar, I did host a screening of Endo what years ago? I think it was like 7 or 8 years ago. And patients just with their parents coming up and talking to me, how it just changed that conversation for them. So Shannon, can't thank you enough for coming on and talking with us. I know you have a crazy busy schedule, but thank you for making this film and sharing it with all of us and pushing so hard on a daily basis to get awareness out there about this disease.
Thank you. Thanks, Melissa. It's been an honor.
Appreciate it. Thank you.